Welcome to the future of art. Who is art for? My name is Aaron Dworkin, and I'm a professor of arts leadership and entrepreneurship at the School of Music, Theater, and Dance here at Michigan, founder of the Sphinx organization and host of the weekly show Arts Engines. And I will be serving as moderator for what I anticipate will be an informing and engaging session on this critically important topic. The Future of Art is a new series from the President's Arts Initiative and examines the role of the arts in our changing world. While we are in the midst of a societal moment of captivation surrounding diversity, equity, and inclusion in the arts, that is countered by the ongoing statistical reality that the majority of those who consume our various disciplines of art making lack the rich texture that comprises the mosaic of what is the diverse American tapestry. While statements of solidarity from predominantly white institutions are flooding our digital pathways, all too often, those who comprise our communities of color find the reality of their artistic opportunities and networks remaining static. Despite these contrasts, there are leaders in our field who are not only doing the hard work to bring about transformational solutions today because it is timely, but have been deeply immersed in bringing about impact for years because they understand and are dedicated to the role of DE&I in this important medium of the arts that provides the fabric which connects us as a nation. Today, we will have the opportunity to learn from and dialogue with our featured guest, Donna Walker-Kuhne, a nationally recognized expert in audience development and founder of Walker Communications Group. I have had the honor and privilege to work with and benefit from Donna's expertise when we engaged with her building the annual Sphinx Gala concert at Carnegie Hall, which now sells out every year. Thank you so much for joining us today, Donna. In addition, I'm excited to share the incredible members of our panel for today's session, all of whom I have had the distinct honor to work with and see their passion and expertise in practice. So I know this will be an extraordinary session. Our panelists include Cayenne Harris, Vice President of Education and Community Engagement for the University Musical Society; Sara Billmann, Vice President of Marketing and Communications for the University Musical Society; and Jim Leija, Deputy Director for Public Experience and Learning with the University of Michigan's Museum of Art. Thank you all again for joining us. So to get us started, Donna will take about 15 minutes to share some of her thoughts on this issue of the future of art, including the important social justice work that she is doing at the New Jersey Performing Arts Center. And then we'll move on to our panelists.
Thank you very much. It's so great to see all of you, and I thank you, University, for your very kind invitation. It's always wonderful to speak with colleagues and peers. And so, to respond to this question, of course, we have to look at where are we now, and it is a very unique environment, certainly this time last year. And what and where the arts move in the future is very much informed by the three pandemics that we're currently experiencing. COVID-19, systemic racism being put under a very severe lens, and of course, the divisiveness of our political election. So all of that informs the arts. The arts do not function in isolation, and we're very much impacted by what goes on around us. And so I think about what are the roles of the arts administrators, those of us who help make it happen, and of course, the art, which is the centerpiece. And I think that artists more than ever have demonstrated how critical and viable that it is as a medium, because during this certainly pandemic, number one, it's been the arts that has enabled many of us to survive. We've all, been watching TV. Those are artists, actors, that we've discovered new ways of exhibiting our artistic expression and being able to find new ways of presenting and developing new art. I'm very excited about the cross-cultural opportunities. I'm excited about seeing the pipelines that are being developed and looking at the leadership in our arts organizations, and that there is absolutely an intentional effort to make that more diverse. As I'm experiencing more artistic and associate directors of color, more women being appointed, that will have a direct impact on the art. It will have a direct impact on what's presented, what's being designed, what's being shared. Also looking at the content of art. I saw an article yesterday in the New York Times about Rhiannon Giddens, who is now heading the Silk Road, which is Yo-Yo Ma's organization. So to have this woman of color who lives in Ireland that is designing this initiative, for Yo-Yo Ma and where it can go and how it will impact the stories that they tell. So it will be stories that are actually rooted in communities of color, being presented by various different kinds of musicians. I think that's fantastic. And I'm hoping that there'll be more of that. And so we're not staying in these lanes. So it doesn't just have to be Black theaters doing works by Black playwrights, although that's, of course, very important and always important to tell the narrative. But I'm very interested in the cross-cultural and looking at the dynamics that allow different stories to be told in a way that honors them, that dignifies them, but also piques curiosity. Because I believe part of the reason that we're struggling with pandemics number 2 and 3 is because we don't know much about each other, that we've stayed in our own bubble. And with that then comes misunderstandings, misconceptions, and that's when we start to really see this deepening of systemic racism. It's already, part of our society, but even more so. And so the opportunity that we have in front of us, one, is not to be constricted by what we've done in the past. We don't have to bring all of that forward with us. It says one of my favorite writers, Arundi Roy, says, come through lightly. This portal that we currently are experiencing, this portal of change and transformation that we can walk through lightly with one baggage. That's my goal, one bag. Meaning we don't have to bring all the systems with us, all of those past, strategies that we thought worked and some that didn't work. But this is the time to refresh and renew. And that's for all of us that are involved in how we support and engage the arts. I think it's also a moment for entrepreneurship to really step forward more than ever before. And so that we're seeing how artists are understanding the importance of business. And I know that's something that Aaron is very passionate about. And I'm so excited, that he has integrated that in his curriculum so that, artists are understanding that this is a business as well. And it doesn't compromise the art, to be able to live in a more comfortable way. And so you're thinking, well, we're in a pandemic, so how much money can we make? Well, it's about how creative can we be? How do we share the work? But also, what else do we value? And so value means, I believe, exposure and opportunity. And that's also something that I've been doing a lot of work with and on. And so, one of my clients that I've worked with for many years is the New Jersey Performing Arts Center. And when I started there, I was the vice president of marketing. And then I realized we needed to focus on community engagement and was able to create that department, one of the first in the country at that time, 6-7 years ago. And then, of course, since the murder of George Floyd, I pulled out of community engagement to focus on social justice. So when I think about the future of art and where we're going, I really believe it is having our lens sharply tuned in to uprooting systemic racism, to uprooting what is not a humanistic organization, because we owe this, I believe this is part of our relationship, our connection to the arts, is to present it in the best format possible, in the best circumstances. So that means there's work to do. In many of our arts organizations, we have work to do. And so social justice is one of the ways that we can unearth that while still programming. So it's not as if business stops. No, our business reflects what these initiatives look like. And so beginning in this past June, we started having conversations internally with our executive leadership about how can we be responsive state arts organization to, the Black Lives Matter movement, to this continued murder of African-American people. What can we do about that? Particularly since we're in a city where the majority, 80% of the residents are African-American. And so again, am I responsive to where I live? That's very important, point number one. So we look at programming. Well, what can we do? Everything is virtual. That's fine. We already have established that we can do our work virtually on the platform. And so because PSE&G have been our corporate sponsor for our True Diversity film series, which we'd already been doing for 5 years, we requested permission to, again, fine-tune the lens to social justice, which they were delighted to do because they were also thinking about this. So there's collaboration across multiple platforms. We don't do our work in isolation. So we look at what is our funding community looking at? What statements do they want to make? How can the arts provide that as a resource, as a platform? And so in our dialogues, we said, well, let's look at what issues are facing the Black community today. Number one, voter registration. And we all know the impact of voting. We've seen that. And then, registering to vote and also voting and understanding why. And the second critical issue was completing the census, because without the census, we don't get the resources in our community, which leads to deeper poverty, to more crime and violence. And so there's a direct connection between them being involved in the community and then what we do as an art center. So we can't expect to see people running in and buying tickets if they're all struggling, if everyone is, saying we don't have the income or we don't have this as a focus. So by being responsive to the community, we then open up our arms to say, we care about you. And these are the critical issues, and we're going to talk about them in a way that's accessible. So that's a community engagement component of it. And so looking at our film series and having panel discussions with local New Jersey tastemakers and stakeholders was a way that we started to roll this out. So we started with talking about voting and why to vote. And then we looked at the documentary by Ava DuVernay, 13th, to look at what is the impact of the 13th Amendment. Then we talked about white fragility, and that was an all-white panel. They really looked at, how can white people start to take responsibility, understand their role in transforming themselves and then society, the community, and moving forward. And then we've talked about, actually tonight, our panel will be policing the police. And so, of course, there's lots of conversations about defunding the police. Well, is that necessarily the answer? Well, we're going to discuss that and see. Again, with, representatives from the mayor's office, captains from the police force, as well as individuals who have been arrested by the police, when they had not committed a crime. So we look at how do we create dynamic dialogues that are brave and bold, that are going to unpack these issues based on a film, so that there's a foundation in which we can all look at and then discuss this coupled with action steps. So we don't just have a panel discussion and say, oh, that was nice. Yeah, I really liked hearing that. No, there are action steps on what to do, what everyone can do. We believe by empowering our community to be more action-oriented is where we can see the change that we're all looking for. And so with the voting panels, we had many, many strategies on how people could vote, where they could vote, who they should vote for, not recommending anyone, but giving them all the candidates so that they could choose from an intelligent place. And then for the census completion, we did the same thing, really following up on that. And so we believe that by providing the information as an arts organization keeps us vital, because we're not selling tickets right now. No one is, certainly not in any significant way, because we all pretty much have our doors closed. So as an arts organization, in this time of COVID-19, this is a very important question. How do I remain vital to my audiences, to my community? And I believe it's by being responsive to what are the topical issues that we're faced with at this time. And then how do we look at these in an intelligent way that invites conversation and dialogue and relevancy? And so then, of course, at some point, we know that we'll be having some type of live performance. We know then that there will be a much more inclination to participate once you get over the safety issues, of course, but much more likely to participate because you were heard, because you were engaged, because there's a relationship. So I believe now more than ever, community engagement leads the way forward, not back. Forward. So if we want to move forward as a field, we talk about the arts, it is based on partnerships, relationships, relevancy in our programming and making it as accessible as possible. And I know that so many of my colleagues and peers are struggling with resources. I know that the downsizing, furloughs, and layoff have been tremendous. Everyone is doing the work of 3 or 4 people. So this is the time for us to really drill down, make that commitment. Yep, I'm already exhausted, but this is important. This is my priority. The other point is working cross-departmentally within your organizations enables you to be able to fulfill these goals. You know, the structure of arts organizations is that we pretty much stay in our lane. You know, fundraising does what they do, marketing does what they do, arts education. But now, because the staffs are so lean, there's this cross-departmental effort that is making the work happen. And it's very exciting, so that each department brings a richness that helps the organization to achieve the goal. So that's another benefit moving forward. You know, is how we can start to blur those lines that were preventing us from really engaging with our own internal staff, to now looking at what are the resources you have that can enable us as an organization to reach these demographics, these communities in a more thoughtful way. So we have many opportunities before us, you know, to think about what's next for the arts. How will the arts advance? It's up to us to be smart, to take advantage of them, to be bold, and to have the internal conversations and dialogues that will enable this to happen. I firmly believe that dialogue is the sole function of how we as arts administrators are going to transform our society. I wanted to share just a couple of quotes from one of my mentors that talks a lot about the value of dialogue. And, you know, his name is Daisaku Ikeda. And he says, dialogue starts from the courageous willingness to know and be known by others. It is the painstaking and persistent effort to remove all obstacles that obscure our common humanity. Dialogue challenges us to confront and transform the destructive impulses inherent in human life. So you have to think about it. Okay, well, why do we have to do this anyway? Well, that's part of human nature, but that doesn't mean we can't change that. And through dialogue, by having these constant, you know, opportunities to exchange, to discover, to unpack, to sometimes feel affronted, all of those things is how we move this needle forward. People always want to know how. How is not a mystery. How is the work? And it's you making the commitment to do the work. It's not taking a pill. It's not just reading a book. Yes, the book provides information, but fundamentally, we have to examine ourselves. What is in my heart? How can I transform my heart to be a better person and to be aware of my behavior? You know, Daisaku Ikeda also says, most needed today is dialogue that helps us to reflect on our own beliefs and presumptions and challenges us to transform the inner biases that make it easy to identify people as the other, as separate or different. And through these discussions, we can break these barriers and develop a new level of humanity. So when I dream about what will be the outcome 5 years from now, when we all look back and say, woo, 2020 was something else. I don't know how I made it, but look where we are now. My goal is that we see a new level of humanity, that we see a new consciousness of really being aware of my behavior, of systemic racism and how much it is a product of American society. So that means everyone has a responsibility to examine that. And what can I do to transform that? So I like to dream that that will be one of the changes that we start to see. And fundamentally, if we understand and remember that we are all interconnected, the interconnectedness of life, you know, is what, for me, would then prohibit that kind of negative thinking of other, or that I'm better than you, or that I want you to feel less than. So when individuals cannot grasp or appreciate their connection with others, then it gives rise to a sense of isolation, mistrust, hostility, or apathy. And it leads to a society based on fragile human relationships. One of my favorite quotes that George C. Wolfe made when we were doing the national tour, Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk, he did an interview and he said, you know, part of your story bleeds into mine, part of my story bleeds into yours. And it is that connection that makes us whole. And I really subscribe to that. I believe that that is where we will see a majority of the change, by continuing to have these kinds of forums as we're having today. And that it comes from a place of joy. You know, I don't believe that this has to be an austerity, that has to be painful, heavy. Oh, yes, it's hard to hear sometimes, you know, when you hear someone's telling you about your behavior. But on the foundation, I believe that that should come from appreciation and joy. And so for me, I stress that feeling of gratitude, appreciation for being with you all this afternoon, knowing that hopefully everyone will walk away with a nugget of what I can do better, how I can be better. And looking forward to hearing more of the conversation with my colleagues. So thank you. Thank you. And I believe I am going to now welcome our next speaker, Cayenne Harris.
Thank you so much, Donna, and hello, everyone. I'm Cayenne Harris. I'm so excited to be part of this conversation. I have to say, Donna's words just really resonated with me deeply. As somebody who's spent her career in community engagement, the idea that arts organizations might lead from a place of community engagement is truly exciting and transformational, and I'll touch on that a little bit in my comments as well. So I'm new to UMS. I just started basically at the start of the pandemic. So I'm still getting to know this community, and I'm delighted to be here. And I come here after about 20 years in Chicago, where I really spent my career working for traditional performing arts organizations. I worked for the Chicago Symphony Orchestra and then Lyric Opera. They acknowledge that their primary audiences are mostly homogeneous, and that audiences for traditional performing arts are diminishing over time. It's not a sustainable model, yet they struggle to make any changes to it beyond the short term. Efforts to develop new audiences have been around for many years. They're not new. And in my experience, they are mostly unsuccessful. This is due in part to the way that most cultural institutions define audiences. And they really define audiences as a transactional relationship. So the relationship looks like this. Cultural institutions are the curators. They make the choices about what art gets created and presented, and audiences pay to have access to that curation. The public is supposed to view these institutions and their artists or leaders as the pinnacles of culture, and ticket purchasers are the passive recipients of a finished product in which they have no agency or creative choice beyond what series they purchase or at what price. Artistic excellence, which is a term we've all heard so many times, is a product that gets monetized and purchased. This model has been in place for many years and largely endures despite the fact that audiences continue to dwindle. It's well documented now that taking away the barrier of price does not significantly broaden participation or build audiences. Why? It's in part because it is still a transactional expectation. So free tickets are supposed to lead to a ticket purchase. If that purchase never occurs, there's no audience, right? For that matter, audience development initiatives almost always assume that a new experience with a different format than the traditional one will lead to purchase of a traditional one. So for example, a casual classics series in which the audience and the orchestra dress casually and the performance is only an hour is meant to be a gateway to a regular full evening fancy dress performance. Or the rock band collaborating with an orchestra that attracts a whole different audience with the expectation that those new audience members will buy tickets to the regular programming. Except we know that that's rarely the outcome of such experiments over the long term. I would posit that if we radically redefine the way we think about audiences, we can begin to explore transformational models that point toward a healthier, more robust, diverse, and even democratic future for the arts. I'd like to share a few initiatives that I've been involved in or become aware of that really point to this reimagining of the role of audiences in the arts. Wolf Brown published a report on participatory practice back in 2011 that helped to define work that we now call participatory arts. In the report, they describe an audience spectrum that on one side is purely passive and receptive, And that spectrum moves increasingly toward a creative role for the audience in the artistic product until the line between the audience and artist is blurred beyond recognition. The report also describes how people's connection to the art form deepens as their role in the creative process increases. I've seen this in practice with some of my work at Lyric Opera of Chicago, where I oversaw Lyric Unlimited. Lyric Unlimited is an experimental arm of the company that was tasked with engaging people that historically had no relationship with the company or opera, and to explore the evolution of opera while developing ways to make it resonate more deeply with people from different backgrounds. One exciting example of participatory practice was our work with 6 different community groups that were comprised largely of non-performers or amateur artists to create operas that told the stories of their communities. They embarked on a creative process that upheld the group's creative voice as the primary driver while writing a libretto and songs, embarking on blocking and staging, and ultimately performing these original works at a major downtown theater. While more traditional approaches would likely have involved paying for tickets and transportation for community groups to come downtown to the Opera House to attend a performance of Tosca or La Traviata, inviting people to use opera as a tool for their own storytelling and making available the resources of a major opera company to do so opened up a significant pathway to engagement with the art form on their own terms. At the same time, these original operas allowed the company a way to understand the art form and artistic process in a completely new way, while stepping out of the way to allow community voices to lead. Another exciting development that shifts the paradigm of cultural institutions as the sole instigators of art is the trend of art being created in response to community needs and interests. And Donna spoke so beautifully to the importance of really being in dialogue with community, understanding the pressing needs and frankly, the wants and desires of communities. Most institutions have realized that what I like to call the colonialist approach of bringing art to the community, also known as outreach, is antiquated and ill-advised. What can work better? Ongoing dialogue with communities to understand critical needs and wants, and creating or adapting art in direct response, ideally utilizing artists and artisans from within that community. One example of this is by the innovative New York indie company On-Site Opera, who in 2018 staged performances of Giancarlo Menotti's Amal and the Night Visitors at Holy Apostles Soup Kitchen, in collaboration with Breaking Ground, New York City's largest provider of permanent supportive housing for the homeless. Their performances featured a chorus made up of community members who had experienced homelessness, performing alongside renowned opera soloists and musicians. Instead of paying for tickets, audience members were asked to bring food donations. And in both of the examples I've given about these really community-led projects, the amateur artists and performers were paid for their time and work, which is also a critical component of this. So I could go on because there's lots of great examples, but as we consider the question of who art is for and who participates, I hope that these examples offer some interesting insights and perspectives. It's not a complete model for how to go forward, but I think there's some interesting ideas in there that will lead us toward a future that is more inclusive. And I know that my colleagues on this panel have so much more to add. And I'm actually delighted to turn it over now to a dear friend and colleague, Sara Billmann, who I first met while we were both involved in a long-term experiment conducted by the Wallace Foundation, exploring the sustainability and building of audiences. We've had so many discussions on this subject, and I know she'll add a lot to this discussion.
Thank you, Cayenne. I am so delighted to be the bridge between 2 fantastic education and community engagement professionals at UMS, but more than anything, as I hear you talk, I just can't wait until we can do this together in person and really collaborate. When I was asked to join this panel and to talk about audiences, you know, the first thing that struck me was that is about the broadest conversation and topic that one could possibly tackle. And I think that Cayenne really hit the nail on the head in talking about how so often audiences are just viewed as a transactional relationship. And that is part of what makes it so difficult. I so appreciate what Donna was saying about not being constricted by what we've done in the past, because I think that in the past we have really thought about audiences as a transactional relationship, and that needs to change. Combining all of that with where we are right now with no in-person audiences, again, it just really got me thinking a lot about what the term audience even means anymore. As a marketing professional, so much of our effort is really focused on the revenue goals, filling the seats for the performances. Early on in my career, we were all taught about this mythical audience pipeline where somebody attends a free workshop, then they decide to buy a ticket, then they come back, then they subscribe, then they become a donor, then they become a board member, and so on. And I think we've all learned over time that that is just ridiculously aspirational. And in reality, the pathway isn't nearly that clear, and it isn't nearly that predictable. Now, for a multidisciplinary arts organization like ours, but really even for single discipline organizations like a symphony or a theater company, there really is no singular monolithic audience, even though we like to think there is. And we have people who enjoy the breadth of the performing arts, but there are some people who will only come to jazz or who will only come to dance. We really love them, and so on. But really, I think when we in institutions refer to the audience, we're really talking about a small, loyal subset of that group. Mostly the subscribers and the donors who are most likely to support our work on an ongoing basis. And because they're loyal and because they buy a lot of tickets, it's really easy for the marketers among us to look for more people like them, which, and Cayenne alluded to this as well, ultimately may lead to more homogeneity of the audiences overall. And we need to guard against that tendency at every turn if we want to have audiences that reflect the full breadth of our community. So all of this led me to start thinking about that very term audience, and ultimately who really gets to decide who is our audience. Is the audience really about the number of people who attend a performance, the number of people, or is it about how engaged they are with the work that we do? Sometimes the smaller audiences are the ones that actually have the best experience. Personally, I know people who rarely attend our performances, but they can't imagine our community without UMS and the other arts organizations here. And they regularly cite the arts as one of the things that make our community special. Are they our audience, even if they never participate in anything that we do? We all know people who talk about how loyal they are to our institutions, and then we look them up in our database and we discover that they were last here 5 years ago, or maybe they come once every 2 or 3 years. Do they still count as audiences? For a lot of the marketers among us, they're not really taken as seriously. But then we have to think about those people for whom that one time that they attended was something they talk about all the time because it had such a life-changing experience for them. Or the people who come to the annual Messiah concerts because that's what really connects them to family and to tradition. I often liken it, I only go to my favorite restaurant for dinner about once a year, but I still consider myself a loyal customer and I talk it up to others. The restaurant might not think of me as a loyal customer, but I do. I've analyzed our ticket sales over the years. It's actually one of those things that I weirdly love to do. And over the past 8 years, pre-pandemic, only 20% of our ticket buyers purchased multiple performances in multiple years. 60%, almost 60%, have bought only one performance once in that entire 8-year period. And it's easy to think, well, what have we done wrong that those 60% come so infrequently? Have we done something wrong? Whatever we've been doing, those 60% should be doing a lot to keep us on our toes. And they also allow us to expand our reach to be more representative of the communities that we serve. Now that coronavirus has shut us down and we've moved our presentations online, I have absolutely no idea who is watching anything we present beyond the broadest set of stats measuring unique viewers. And it's incredibly unsettling. And yet there's also something really liberating about it. Given that all of our online performances are now free, I have no idea who's attending, save for the few who make donations after viewing. And it makes me wonder if we've removed a barrier for attendance, although I think, as Cayenne has pointed out, and as we've certainly experienced in other cases, just because something is free doesn't mean that it's necessarily more successful. And we've certainly seen a number of free performances that we've done where half of the people don't show up, even when it's something as terrific as a pop-up free concert by the New York Philharmonic. And maybe we've actually, in setting up everything for online, maybe we've created new barriers for people who don't have great internet or who aren't as facile working with their computers or their smart TVs to view what we're putting out there. I've always been really inspired by Woolly Mammoth Theater in DC, whose approach was not necessarily about finding the biggest audience, but about finding the right audience for the work they were putting on stage. The UMS performances that I've attended, where the audiences look and feel different from our quote unquote regular audiences, have a wildly different electricity and excitement in the air as well. And so it's gotten me to thinking, if just like we do zero-based budgeting, what if we did zero-based audience building, where we really start from scratch for every performance and think about who we want to see in the theater and how we would go about getting them there. On the one hand, it's exhausting to think about, but it's really what we should be doing for every single performance we're offering. When we presented our first No Safety Net series a couple of years ago, it was a set of 4 plays that address topical and important themes, 2 years ago, excuse me. You could just tell that something was different when you went into the theater. And in large part, I think that was because nearly half of the audience was students. And what was interesting to me was that even the quote unquote regular audiences, our subscribers, commented on that and really appreciated it. I was in a focus group last summer that Alan Brown, who I really think is one of the great artistic scholars about audiences, he led a focus group through the same Wallace project that Cayenne referenced. And in that group was an 80-year-old doctor, actually I think even a little older, who attended one of the performances. And she talked about how much she gained and learned and grew from sitting next to somebody who wasn't like her and who came from a wildly different background as a student. As I mentioned, those focus groups came out of a Wallace Foundation funded research effort. And I will say that over the last 15 years or so, UMS has made a really significant investment in audience research. And that's ranged from developing new segmentation models that were driven by intrinsic values to post-performance surveys. And what I really love about the research that we do is the open-ended questions. My favorite question has always been the last one that we have, which is anything else you'd like to add? And sometimes you pick up a great quote and it makes you feel really good, but sometimes you also get a gold nugget, something that you'd never even considered because it seems so obvious, at least to us in our institutions. A year or so ago, someone wrote in on a survey that she wished she had known that the parking garages were cash only because she only had a credit card and it took her so long to find an ATM that she missed the beginning of the performance. Maybe we need to change our post-performance survey questions to what is the one thing you wish you would have known before attending that would have made your experience better? That could help us with new audience members to reach the people who don't already know who we are and what we do and give them a more positive experience. So all of that is really to say, the other side of this pandemic is going to provide opportunities for us to really rethink what audiences mean and what audiences are. Deep down, I believe that all of the isolation and the online viewing in the absence of a fellow community strips away part of the experience for both the artist and the audience member. But I'm also hopeful, especially listening to all of these conversations about really getting into the community and having it be less transactional and more participatory, that we'll really be able to step back and think about who we want to see in our audiences. And that means all of our audiences, not just the ticket buyers, and to plan and to act accordingly. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my former colleague in the education department, Jim Leija. Jim started working with me at UMS, and I don't even know how many years ago at this point. He was in the marketing office and then moved up to head the education and community engagement team before he started as deputy director of the Museum of Art a year ago. Jim.
Thanks, Sarah. Sara was actually the person who hired me at UMS, so I always like to give the shout out for Sara setting me on the arts administration path. I have the agony and advantage both of being the sort of last panelist today, and I just want to thank all of you for your remarks so far and how much they've resonated with me, and also thank Donna for setting us up to think through these triple pandemics of COVID-19, political divisiveness, and systemic racism. And I wanted to talk about two initiatives at the Museum of Art, UMA, which are directed at making UMA a place of belonging and really expanding our definition of who and what the museum are for, and kind of respond to this question of what is the role of arts organizations in our democracy, and what is the responsibility of arts organizations towards dismantling systemic racism. I have often thought of arts institutions, cultural centers, museums, performing arts centers as the town square, places of maybe the most sort of democratic expression of representation of the diversity of our culture. That's sort of the ideal for me, in the sense that we can all show up in the town square being our sort of authentic selves. And sadly, as we know, that is not often the reality. But I am excited by the potential right now in the pandemic, which has disrupted all of our kind of conventional ways of thinking to work differently, to work outside of the idea of the transaction, and to sort of live into the notion that community engagement is out ahead, leading the way. Before I talk about these two initiatives at UMA, I just want to honor my colleagues at the museum. I see like many of them on this Zoom, and it totally freaks me out to talk about our work. And I just want to make sure that you know that these things that I'm talking about today, that this amazing team at UMA has made some incredible contributions to, and I'm really just honored to kind of represent our work as an institution. So the first thing I just wanted to talk about is UMA's Vote 2020 project, which I think if you're on campus, you're probably familiar with it. In 2018, Michigan voters passed Proposal 3, which allowed for no questions absentee ballot voting and allowed same-day registration and voting, and also allowed for the establishing of satellite city clerk's office beyond what the permanent location of a city clerk's office. So this past fall, just weeks ago, we opened a fully functional Ann Arbor City Clerk's office in the Sten Gallery at the Museum of Art, and that's our gallery that faces State Street. It's the glassed-in gallery, which is one of the most visible spaces on campus. And I'm going to name just a slew of folks that were involved in this project, because what I think in terms of the future of who is art for, what I'm finding is that the kinds of collaborations we're leaning into are ones that involve a lot of co-authors, people who have different stakes in how projects happen. And in this case, we worked, of course, very closely with the Ann Arbor City Clerk's office and Jackie Boudry, who's the Ann Arbor City Clerk. The Creative Campus Voting Project, which is a multi-year project led by Professor Stephanie Rowden and Hannah Smotrick of the Stamp School of Art and Design. It was Hannah actually who designed the aesthetics of the space that housed the City Clerk's office. And then there were students from the Stamp School, as well as the Museum Student Engagement Council, who designed Get Out the Vote activities outside of the gallery. Edie Goldenberg, who's a professor at the Ford School, who leads a group called Turn Up, Turn Out, and there are a number of students who work in that group. Michael Rain in the U of M Office of Government Relations, Aaron Burns at the Ginsberg Center for Community Service and Learning, and of course, our staff at UMA, led by the amazing Bree Stier-Pulowski, and with great support from Neil Van Houten, Terry Gable, Bruce Glazier, and our U of M student navigators and our DPSS security staff. So it's like this entire mechanism of the museum, and then beyond, creating space to actually make voting accessible right in the heart of our campus, creating an environment that was welcoming, and really aesthetically inviting. We had, as some of you will know already, over 5,000 voters registered to vote at the museum, and over 8,500 ballots were cast at the museum. And the data is suggesting that the majority of the voters were first-time voters, largely students. And if you came on election day, you actually got to go into the apps and sit down at a desk and vote in the presence of the art that was in the apps. And I have to say that we have this conversation at the museum often, that there are a whole lot of things that would be better if you could do them alongside some really great art. And voting is one of them, I think. And I think a lot about the impression that being able to come into a beautiful, aesthetically inviting environment with lots of helpers has on the mindset of a first-time voter. I don't know about you, but the first time I voted, and probably most times thereafter, it's been in a kind of cold high school gymnasium somewhere. This was really a beautiful experience. And I think the headline for this particular project is, how can an art museum like ours be more central to civic life and democracy, not only through forms of intellectual discovery and community dialogue, but in ways that are practical and specific, and in this case, bringing the very act of voting and voter registration into the space. And like I said, you know, this was such a very rich group of partners coming together, some of whom we have collaborated with at the museum before, who've walked along a path with us to get to this point. And when this project came to us, we were able to work differently in ways because of the constraints of the pandemic. We were so limited in terms of what we could do in the building that it presented an opportunity for us to really take advantage of a project that just kind of came to us because of these partner relationships. It was an open and sort of sharing process, and really involved some deep collaboration. And I think we'll take away from that this notion that the museum is actually a viable partner for civic engagement, which is a different way for our campus partners to think about us. So I hope you'll take a look at that. The next thing I want to talk about is something that many institutions are doing, which is issuing anti-racist action and commitment statements. UMA released an anti-racist action statement and set of commitments that went public at the end of August. And I want to kind of rewind back to June and talk about that moment. You know, when George Floyd was killed and the protests erupted, UMA was actually pretty quick to respond with a post of solidarity using a historical photo by the photographer Danny Lyon from 1964 of a Black man being brutalized by the National Guard during a racial justice protest. This photo is really pointed to, I think, something really important about the double-edged nature of these kinds of photos, both as historical documentary, but also as a kind of depiction of trauma and a sort of traumatizing catalyst for people of color in particular, Black people in particular in this case. This was part of a social media post and art in your inbox. And almost immediately, we received feedback, negative feedback about this photo and its traumatizing effects in this very hot moment. And it was, I think, a very deep learning experience for those of us who were involved in the post. As a result of that, actually, we reached out to some folks to say, what should we be doing differently? And one of the suggestions from a young person who had responded to the post was, do you think the museum could put a Black Lives Matter banner on the front of the museum? And there was a lot of energy amongst our staff, a predominantly white and historically white staff, to do that. But we also had the realization that if we did that, we needed to be more specific and actionable about our action steps towards creating a more anti-racist institution. And what that resulted in is UMA's DEI committee coming together over the summer months to develop the commitment to anti-racist action. And it was a highly collaborative process. And I think the beginning of a really complex journey within the institution towards working with a set of internal and external stakeholders that will hold us accountable, including students and UMA staff and program partners beyond the museum. Much of this kind of work in going out to stakeholders was done before the statement went public, and we received a lot of feedback. And when the statement went public, we asked for feedback to be continuous. So you can provide feedback to it, and we'd invite you to do that. You've received a link to see what we've included in that statement, including amplifying BIPOC perspectives and voice, being honest and transparent about our history and our collection, making the museum an open, safe, comfortable, and equitable place, and mandating anti-racist staff development and education. And as we all know, museums have not been a place of equality and solidarity where everyone feels like they belong, and we want to change that. And it will be work that takes forever. And in the meantime, we are setting ourselves up a number of goals in a 5-year plan to really address the commitments that we've made in this document. Because I mentioned there are lots of institutions doing this work right now, releasing these statements, I sent a link around for the Mass Action Consortium, which is is an acronym for a group called Museum as Site for Social Action. And this organization has aggregated all of the anti-racist statements that have been made by museums that are a part of the American Alliance of Museums. There are about 1,000, a little over 1,000 museums in that alliance. And about 572 of them made racial equity statements. And Mass Action has provided us with links to all of those statements, so you can see how this work is being done across the country, and a rubric for imagining what do we want to see and what do we want to get out of these statements in order to lead us to kind of greater accountability as a sector. And so I just invite you to look at that to see how these statements are being crafted across the country, and to also follow how they will be practiced and how they will change our practice and how they will move us forward, hopefully as a field and as a culture as a whole. With that, I want to pass it back to Aaron and kind of open up the conversation. Aaron?
Thank you so much, Jim. And thank you to all of our panelists. This is just, I mean, extraordinary. I'm just going through so many ideas and thoughts in my own mind, and I'm sure our audiences as well. It's just been extraordinary. So to start us off in our kind of discussion, I was going to just pose an initial question to all of our panelists. But while I do that, all of you who are tuning in, please feel free, submit your questions in the chat box, and we'll be getting those processed and coming up through, and we'll try to get to as many of them as possible. So my question for our panelists, and please feel free, any and all panelists, to just chime in because it's directed to all of you. But so the question is really, what do you feel are barriers to diverse audiences engaging with the arts, and what has been effective in breaking or circumnavigating those barriers? So basically, in other words, what I'm wondering is really pragmatically, what are the biggest obstacles in terms of diverse audiences, and what has actually been proven to work? And I think that might be helpful for all of us. Does anyone want to tackle that?
I can jump in. I'm always good to go first if I can.
Awesome.
You know, I think the biggest barrier in my experience has been historical exclusion. So when arts organizations have implicitly or explicitly excluded people of color, it's really hard to make a turn on that and expect that audiences of color are going to feel trust and feel safe in spaces where they have not felt welcome. And so to me, that's the biggest barrier. You can break it down and look at cost. You can look at the experience of art on stage, which I'll get into, You can look at the story that the organizations tell. All of those things create what I feel can be an impenetrable wall at times. And so I have heard this again and again and again from people of color who will tell me, I tried to go to the symphony and I did not feel comfortable. The other audience members made me feel that I did not belong there. I did not see anyone on stage who looked like me. I did not find it to be a welcoming experience. And I think often arts organizations respond with defense, but we gave you a reduced price ticket, but it was a program that was very accessible. Why didn't, like often there's a response of defense rather than one that is based in listening and trying to understand.
Yeah.
So I see that play out over and over again. Another thing that I see, I mentioned it really briefly, is the story that your organization tells, often without realizing it. So one thing that was true at Lyric Opera of Chicago was that the majority of our ushers were people of color. So in many ways, that's a good thing if there's a diverse group of people that work in the building. But if all of the people that you see who are working are in jobs that may be perceived as servile, then it tells a story that you may not be intending to tell. And if you have images in your program that depict audience goers as being wealthy and white, dressed in tuxedos, that reinforces a barrier that people already experience to your institution.
Yeah.
And so I think those are all part of what builds this impenetrable wall. And then, the number one thing is programming that's relevant, that's responsive, that is of meaning to audiences that may not have seen themselves or their stories represented on stages. So we could go in, but I'll let others respond.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Kaya. That was fantastic. And I know we've got some other questions coming in. Did maybe one other person want to just weigh in relatively briefly on that? And then I'll try to go to another question.
I would add this in terms of what are successful models or programs that do work. I believe it is partnerships with organizations. I think it's long-term partnerships. I think it's having advisory councils and committees. With Alvin Ailey is one of my clients, and I do the cultivating African-American audiences in targeted urban cities, and we always see a significant increase when we have ambassadors for Ailey. Just the idea of being asked and being valued, and that this is consistent throughout the year. It's not just because you're coming one time, but it's constantly, having this role and connection to the arts organization. That absolutely, I think, is successful in terms of sales, because that's audience development, but it's successful in terms of the Black community feeling as if I am important, I am valued, and what I bring is going to be useful towards advancing something I believe in, that I cherish. So I definitely believe that those two, which are difficult to manifest, to manage and sustain, but that I believe is where the real magic is.
Awesome. So we've got another question came in, and maybe Jim or Sara, you want to kind of tackle relating to accessibility. So this question of, what is, we think about this future of art, do you think things might be different that relates to people with various disabilities, hearing or others, and how we can use technology in terms of engaging with them? Do you see what that future might be looking like?
I mean, I feel like I've done a lot of, thinking about accessibility as it pertains to, physical disabilities in the built environment in terms of different ways. I mean, part of my purview at the museum is to think through what that experience feels like when you're in space. And it's interesting, one of the things that we're learning about a building that has a lot going on in it, with a cafe and tours and just noise and vibrancy, is that it becomes really difficult to hear if you're on a tour or you're having a class and so forth. So I do think that this idea of very simple things about sort of assisting people, and just as a sort of standard towards universal design, always using amplification of sound, for example. And I think for, you know, and that's kind of like that is the ideal, which is to think through this sense of like, we design really with all ability in mind, which unfortunately I think is not necessarily always done. And you know, we kind of have ADA as a sort of a baseline, but I think it really should only be a baseline. It's basically the bare minimum. And you know, in our sector, thinking through sort of like the heights of things on walls and where vitrines go and how people might navigate the space if they're using a wheelchair or some other kind of assistance is really important. And then even beyond that, I do think there's just like so much happening right now in terms of representation. In my professional life, I'm also a part of Dance USA, and dance and disability has become a very big focus in the dance sector. And the idea that we are really like, we have to challenge the aesthetics of our sectors as it relates to what we consider to be like aesthetically interesting or worthy. And I'm really inspired in particular by you know, dance companies that are integrated. And there are a few really high profile ones like Axis Dance and Dancing Wheels that are changing the way that we even think about the human body and its representation on stage. So there is so much to explore there. And I feel like it's also one of those just like frontiers that arts organizations are really just at the beginning of digging into.
Totally. No, thank you for that. And I know, unfortunately, we're really running short on time, so this might need to be our last question, but one of our viewers asked, and maybe Sarah, you might want to address, which is a very straightforward question. Has capitalism caused this transactional concept of art and music?
I guess that will teach me not to hold back on the first question that's asked. You know, it's an interesting question. And I think as we've seen the just the finances and the economics of the performing arts in particular over, you know, the past 30, 40, 50 years, of course, capitalism has had an impact on it. You know, you can't, I love the Billmann, you know, the great economist study basically saying you can't perform a Mahler symphony any more efficiently now than you could when it was written 100 years ago. And you can't make the violinist work harder and have half as many, and you can't do it faster and have the piece have the same meaning. It's just a reality of the economies. And so the fixed costs continue to go up. And organizations, I mean, when I started at UMS in the late 80s as an intern, the fundraising program was fledgling and accounted for a very small part of our budget every year, probably 10% at that point. And now it's more like 60, 65, 70%. So there's no question that that capitalism is having an impact there, and certainly also in terms of who is able to afford to attend and who comes. And I think it's a real problem, and it's something, you know, certainly I'll own up to just being aware of the complications and the barriers that poses more recently. But I think it's something as an industry we have to grapple with a lot more, and how we make things more accessible in that regard as well.
And just a quick follow-up to that, do you feel like this online media engagement in any way may have a future impact where people will engage with certain arts consumption that they otherwise never would have through media, and because of the technology that could change some of the financial paradigms that have always been there?
Absolutely. I think that people are much less risk averse when they're viewing something online. They'll try something that they haven't seen before and see if they like it, and might, whereas, you know, shelling out $75 for a ticket might be less likely. But I think that it creates its own set, and, you know, Jim talked about this a little bit with accessibility. Not everybody has equal access to things being on the internet in the same way.
That's
And
right.
it can be a bandwidth issue, it can be a cost issue, it can be a skill issue, it can be somebody with a 10-year-old computer that works great for looking at email, but doesn't really work great for processing a streaming show. So I think it's a way for people to explore more what's out there and kind of reduce the risk level. I don't think it's going away, and I think that's great. I think that we will continue to do it. But I will also say producing for digital is not any less expensive than producing for live. It's a different kind of expense. It takes a different kind of resource and a different kind of energy and effort on the part of both the producers and the artists. But I don't know that that's going to solve the capitalist problem.
Gotcha. Well, on that note, unfortunately, we are out of time. This has obviously been an extraordinary conversation on a topic that is critically important to our field. I want to thank our featured guests, Donna Walker-Kuhne, our amazing panelists, Cayenne Harris, Sara Billmann, Jim Leija. Thank you for sharing your time, talent, expertise with all of us. And I always love to end sessions with a quote. So I thought I would share these words from Lyndon Johnson as he signed into existence our National Endowment for the Arts, who said, quote, "Art is a nation's most precious heritage, for it is in our works of art that we reveal to ourselves and to others the inner vision which guides us as a nation. And where there is no vision, the people perish." Thank you all so much for joining us. Please take care, stay safe, and looking forward to our next conversation.